Welcome to another off-season episode of Altitude Advantage. We appreciate you guys listening as we count down the days to training camp. I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, as always, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. Over the past few weeks, we've been giving you guys bite-sizable episodes of our podcast, breaking down different topics. And today's episode is actually going to be the first of two that we're going to focus on position battles. This one, we're going to focus more on the defense as we kind of get into training camp. Position battles are probably one of the favorite things that fans and me personally like to look at, the competitiveness that kind of goes on and really seeing who's going to rise up on this team, because this team is stacked across different positions. And I think looking at the DBs and the safeties, there's so many names to even read from. Obviously, we know PS2, reigning Defensive Player of the Year, is gonna be there to really kind of lead, his position group. But when you look at the rest of them, especially with Jahdae Barron coming down, and then you have Riley Moss and all these guys, how do you see that position battle breaking out?
Yeah, I think when you look at position battles in training camp, you're either looking at who's going to start or kind of what does the depth look like, right? And I think at corner, and to some degree, it is about who's going to start. Riley Moss is a guy who I think performed really well early in the season last year. They asked him to do a lot with teams avoiding Pat Surtain, and you'd think they'd avoid him even more this year. And Riley Moss stepped up to a big degree. Is he that guy still opposite Pat Surtain? He came back from the injury, closed the season, I think, pretty well after that initial rough game that he talked about needing to respond from in Cincinnati. But anytime you bring in a guy like Jahdae Barron and a first-round pick, it'll be interesting to see what that competition looks like. And because we know that Barron is able to play inside and outside, is he able to push for a starting job outside and then shift inside when the Broncos play nickel? So that's something to watch for. And then I think the other thing about the cornerback position is that Jaquan McMillan isn't going anywhere either. I know that
solid guy too.
He played in 33 games over the last two seasons, 4 interceptions, 3 sacks. They can bring him off the edge and blitz the quarterback. Obviously, he had that pick 6 against Jameis Winston there last season and made some big time plays. I think that to just assume that he's going to back down from a position battle isn't right at all, And so I know that as a first-round pick, Jahdae Barron, he's going to have a chance to earn reps, to battle things out. But it's those 3 guys in terms of Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, Jahdae Barron, that for those starting jobs, I'm interested to see, does one guy just play outside, or does one guy earn a job outside and then get shifted inside when they go to nickel? How does the dime package work out? I think that teams so often play in these sub packages now that it's not really even about who are the 2 guys that line up outside in base, because you just don't see that as much anymore. But I expect it's going to be a fierce competition. You got 3 good players. I think you're right that they're all talented and should push each other in terms of getting the best out of each other. So when I look at this Broncos defense, I don't see a ton of spots where there's starting spots up for grabs.
Yeah.
But this might be one of them where maybe you do find a little bit of a position battle there in terms of who's going to start. Or, maybe they go in and say, hey, we're totally comfortable with Riley Moss there at number 2. I do think he did a lot of good things last year, and we're going to have a battle for the nickel position. Or, maybe they handle it another way. But certainly there, I think there's at least the possibility of a position battle, and I'm excited to see, I'll be paying close attention to what do those reps look like when training camp gets here.
Yeah, I think the good thing about PS2, obviously being the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, is that a certain bar is set, right? And for PS2 coming into this year, I know he just wants to excel more and even past that to become even better, which we've talked about that and joked about that. How do you gain more respect from these players? And defensive coordinator Vance Joseph mentioned it, the respect level is going to go even higher for Pat. And whether that's they play him more physical, whatever it is, you want to make sure that everyone else is going to be on that same level as him. And I think when that bar is set, guys can strive to that, especially a young rookie coming in like Barron, to see this is a standard of what this defense is going to be. And in order for me to attempt to, be in a spot across from Pat, I need to see where I can fit in the best. Because I think one of the things that this coaching staff does really well is finding guys in the positions that they're going to excel at the most. And when you talk to DJ Jones and Malcolm Roach and kind of those front guys, like they mentioned one thing about Vance, that he lets you play free and he lets you play aggressive, but he lets you find where you're going to make the biggest impact on this team. So regardless of what fans think should happen, one I think I like about these position battles is that a play might happen and it'll click for a coach like, whoa, the way he did this will fit better here. And even though it might not be what the average person might see, you plug them in there and you will see instant results.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at the cornerback position, versatility is certainly a big deal. And, that's one of the reasons they drafted Jahdae Barron. And again, we've talked about it, but do you play Jahdae in the slot? Do you play him outside? How does that impact the roles for other guys like a Moss, like a Jaquan McMillan, like several other depth pieces on this team? And again, the depth at cornerback, should also be better than it was a year ago. And last year, I think you saw late in the year when there were some injuries that the depth was tested a little bit. And so hopefully overall that cornerback position, whether it's a guy like Chris Abrams-Drain or whoever it is, you're just in a better spot at that position. Elisa, I think the other position group that I'll be watching is at the safety position where, I would expect Talanoa Hufanga and Brandon Jones to be the starters there. They bring in Hufanga in free agency, a big hitter, just an impressive player, former first-team All-Pro. I think in a lot of ways him and Brandon Jones are similar players in terms of their ability to get after the quarterback, but Jones last year showed his range as well and was excited to do that and show a part of his game. But I think behind them is where it really gets interesting to me. You have PJ Locke, a guy that started a bunch of games over the last 2 years, 23 overall. And I wouldn't be surprised if, he tries to push for a starting job still to stay in that role. But regardless, his experience, I think, is what you're looking for in terms of depth, right? And knock on wood, everybody stays healthy, but Hufanga's dealt with a few injury issues. So having PJ Locke there kind of as an insurance policy at the very least is really helpful. And then you've got some young guys. And I guess before we get to the young guys, I should touch on Sam Franklin Jr., who the team signed in free agency, special teams contributor from Carolina, could be. And again, it's important, and we've heard this said this offseason, it's important that if you're not going to start, that you play special teams, that you contribute in that way. I believe Sean Payton was asked about the young safeties and young defensive players in general, and he talked about you've got to be able to contribute on special teams. That's one of the big things. So Sam Franklin there, a veteran going into his 6th year, his ability to contribute on special teams will be big. And then, like I mentioned, some young guys that I think are still trying to prove themselves to some degree in this league. You've got J.L. Skinner, a former draft pick, entering his 3rd year. Delaren Turner-Yell entering his 4th year. He's dealt with some injuries, did not play last season, and so he's a guy that I'm sure is kind of raring to go and show what he can do on the field. And then guys like Devin Key and Keydron Smith, who each have a little bit of playing time, a little bit of experience, but still looking kind of to take that next step. And so I'm interested to see. You've got 2 vets, right, in Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga, and then you've got another couple of veterans in PJ Locke and Sam Franklin. Can one of those younger guys, and in the younger guys, I'm kind of including players that maybe they're in their 3rd or 4th year, but they just haven't played as much.
Yeah.
Can one of those young guys kind of challenge for a spot, or how does this position group come together so you have some young talent there? I think this is really going to bear itself out. Maybe not so much in training camp practices initially, but in the preseason games, who can make a play? If I remember properly last year, Keydron Smith made some big plays in the preseason toward the end, right? I think he had 2 interceptions in that last game. And that's just what I remember. I'm saying I think that. I'm not positive. But the fact that those preseason games, those performances can determine whether you make the roster or not, whether you make the practice squad or not. And let's not forget that, especially the way the seasons go, you can be part of that practice squad and be elevated for games and make an impact. And it's a fluid thing, the back end of the roster. So it'll be interesting to watch in preseason, both when they're on defense and on special teams, which of those guys can make an impact. And I think that's how you find your path to the roster.
I think one of the interesting things about all these position battles that we just went over was you have your anchor points. And I feel like that's a really good thing to have for a team that's really kind of on the upswing of just what they're hoping to do for next season. And when you have those anchor points, you mentioned like you can see the bigger picture. You can step back and see, all right, what can I evaluate? Where do I need to fill certain needs? on this team. And Brandon Jones had mentioned during minicamp that he wants to take more of a leadership role and he wants to be more vocal with the guys and on the field and in meetings and things like that. And I think when you have the experience of a Hufanga coming in, who's very humble and is hungry to kind of make his mark on his own with this team, and you have Brandon Jones, who's coming into his second season, he signed with the Broncos last year, kind of coming in being like, okay, like this is how we're starting to map out like our position group, and these are our anchor points, and everyone else, like, again, the bar is set. I talked about that with PS2. Like the bar is set, and everyone else has to now reach that bar. So I think it's really exciting to see how those position battles are going to play out during training camp.
Definitely, and certainly there's, across the defense, there's going to be spots where guys are competing for spots or roles or whatever it might be. But these are kind of a couple that caught my eye, and excited to see how they play out.
Yeah, well, I cannot wait for training camp. And Broncos Country, as always, make sure you guys comment below and like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let us know what position battles you're looking forward to the most on the defensive side. We got you covered on offense. That will be the next episode, Altitude Advantage, as we continue to count down to training camp. As always, I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com. And don't forget, for all the latest news and headlines, make sure you visit DenverBroncos.com because we have you covered there too.